As you can see, the Jenkins file is divided in different blocks. At the beginning, we declare on which Jenkins agent we want to run our pipeline. Hi, this is Timo. Welcome to Computer Wolf, a channel where we look into the hacks which can make a computer engineer's life a bit easier. If you want to use Liferay and first look into it, depending on what you want to achieve, it can be a daunting task at first. And this only because of the sheer number of possibilities you have. For example, you can develop with the Liferay Developer Studio, which has all you need integrated in one place, or you can use any other IDE like Visual Studio Code. In the latter case, of course, you have to integrate what you need by yourself. Most videos I saw on YouTube make use of the first option just because it seems easier to get into the topic. But then again, the sheer number of possibilities you have make the experience maybe a bit overwhelming. In this video series, I will try to explain why under circumstances the use of Visual Studio Code may be more beneficial to what you are trying to achieve. As always, there is no one-size-fits-all approach and you have to decide yourself what fits you best. As for me, I made the choice because there is seldom a case where I really need all the functions and gimmicks which come with the Eclipse-based Liferay Developer Studio and make it kind of blown up. When we slowly move forward in this series, we will learn about how to use Blade CLI to reach our development goals, as well as how to use the Vue.js framework to implement simple and more advanced widgets for our Liferay pages. So now the big question, for whom do I intend these videos? You should have an understanding on how to be able to set up Liferay and be able to do minor stuff on Linux CLI, since all services we want to deploy are set up in a Linux environment. Of course, you can feel free to transfer the things we discuss here to any other operating system, but this is not the scope of these videos. Knowledge about Docker as well as Github, programming and scripting is desirable but not mandatory, since we discuss every step to set up our development environment. I, for myself, use macOS on my work environment and Linux on my service, but again feel free to use the OS you like, since the steps are similar. For your learning curve, it is best to start on things you're familiar with and feel secure, and then extend your knowledge by trying new things one at a time. Sometimes you may want to revisit some steps in the chain to be able to internalize them. For this purpose, I mark the milestones in any of my videos with chapters so you can easily find the chapter you may want to rewatch. I don't plan a particular order in which I release my videos, but for pedagogical purposes, I will make a playlist in an order that makes sense. Finally, to the scope of this video. In this lesson, we will discuss how Jenkins can help us to implement a stable Liferay environment, from deploying widgets as a continuous integration pipeline to even updating to a new Liferay version. At this point, a big disclaimer. This, of course, is how I approach these things. Maybe you find another solution more viable, so feel free to discuss this in the comments below. Lastly, all projects which are discussed in this and future videos will be available on github.com for easier recapitulation. You'll also find the link in the description below. So, now to the video. So, now a bit about the products we use in this video. At first, we have Liferay Portal. According to Wikipedia, Liferay Portal was created in 2000 as enterprise portal solution for non-profit organizations. In 2004, the company was incorporated as Liferay Inc. and formalized its German subsidiary Liferay GmbH. In 2007, the company opened a new Asian headquarters in Dalian, China, and a Spanish subsidiary, Liferay SL. Then, in 2009, a new office in Bangalore, India was opened. As of today, it has 22 offices worldwide, with over 250 partners and 180,000 open source community members. At the moment, there are two kinds of distribution for Liferay Portal. One is open source community edition and completely free of charge, and the other as a subscription-based model where you buy product support as well as the ability to use their own marketplace for in-software purchases. As for now, we will focus on the community edition, which is free of charge. Liferay Portal itself has a ton of possibilities to realize a web portal for e-commerce or company intranet. What makes it particularly interesting is its ability to be connected to external databases as data source and to be extended by web portlets, widgets, APIs, and so on. As mentioned before, it can be a daunting task to get familiar with the whole product just by the sheer number of possibilities you have to express yourself and your company. So, it's important to take one step at a time. Now to Blade CLI. Let's talk a bit about Blade CLI. This can be as well a subsection of Liferay Portal since they belong together. According to the Liferay Help Center, Blade CLI is the easiest way for Liferay developers to create new Liferay modules. It handles the toolchain from project creation over managing Liferay instances to module deployment. In a future video, I will tackle the ability to create your own project template for Blade CLI so you can, for example, put the common features or your corporate design to be able to produce uniform portlets. In general, all videos of this series will evolve around Blade CLI and Liferay Workspace, just because it's a so handy and powerful tool. So, now to Jenkins. Jenkins, according to Wikipedia, was initially released in 2005, then under the name Hudson by Kosuke Kawaguchi. After a dispute with Oracle in 2011, they renamed the product to Jenkins. It is primarily used to facilitate and automate several parts of software development related to building, testing, and deploying. It supports numerous version control systems, shell and batch scripting, and much more. There are plugins for about anything related to automating software builds or similar. Even messages to your preferred group chat can be implemented either as bash script, which executes curl, or as plugin by the Jenkins community. Concerning the videos, we will shine a light on pipeline scripts and how to use them for our deployment. Pipeline scripts are a handy way to implement a build environment since not much configuration on the UI is necessary and the main configuration takes place in the pipeline scripts and therefore is stored in our source code management as Jenkins File. This gives us the ability to outsource the project configuration to our SCM and in case of a total loss of our Jenkins server, a quick recovery. So, let's start with a simple declarative pipeline. I'll use the example from the documentation about Jenkins files, which is published on jenkins.io as a common ground we can start from. As you can see, I prepared a simple pipeline job in which I will add the Jenkins file we're gonna create. As you can see, the Jenkins file is divided in different blocks. At the beginning, we declare on which Jenkins agent we want to run our pipeline. In our case, Jenkins will run it on any free agent. On more sophisticated Jenkins environments, you may have different agents with different abilities. For example, one on which node is installed and one on which Windows-specific jobs are run with a Windows OS. Jenkins actually recommends not to run jobs on the main node because of security-related reasons and separation of concerns. So, back to the blocks. Every stage marks a build stage in our pipeline. Each stage itself consists of a steps block. The order of execution for these blocks matches the order in which you define them. If one step fails, the complete stage is considered failing and the following stages will not be executed. At the moment, every step we define simply prints either building, testing, or deploying on our console output. So, let's watch our pipeline in action. As you can see, each step is considered passing and the whole build process is successful. At this point, you may ask yourself, but what about the code which has to be run whether the build is failing or not? For example, a step where the workspace has to be cleaned to not unnecessarily use disk space. For this case, we have a directive called always. So let's add a clean workspace step before and after the build. As you can see, we are back at our project definition. So we'll add a stage which is called clean workspace before build. Now let's add a block which has to be run always, and since it's after the build, it has to be in a post step. So let's add this. And now let's take a look what it does. Let's save it again and run our build. So we'll look. This is a stage we implemented before. And as you can see, our clean workspace post action here is run and the build is a success. So what did we do? We first created our pipeline and added several stages. Then, as a post action, we added an always stage which cleaned our workspace. Back to the Jenkins file. let's drag it a bit bigger. So for most of our cases, we either run a shell script in case of Linux and a batch script in case of a Windows host. The one shell in Linux which will be executed is the simple shell. So let's add a shell to our build stage. To keep it simple, I just want the shell to list the contents of our workspace folder. We call the shell with an sh command and our commands inverted commas. So now we can save the file again and run it. And it's done. As you can see here, the contents of our workspace folder is listed. Good. And if you think of shell scripts, they rarely consist of only a single line. So let's change it to a multiple line job. For convenience, I want the script to be ran in bash. So what have we done here? As you can see, I added a shebang to my script to make sure the shell script will be executed in bash. Then I again listed the contents of my workspace folder and created a new one afterwards. Then, after changing the directory to the newly created folder, I create an empty file named test.txt and list the contents of the directory again. Everything is encapsulated in triple quotes. If you later use script or environment variables, in bash scripts you may want to change this in triple double quotes. But since we don't use any variables at this point, this is unnecessary. To later be able to inspect our workspace folder, we commented out the always section. Let's run it again and watch the console output of our job. As you can see, it completed successfully. To check what the script did, we can now inspect our workspace folder and see the folder and file had been created. Here is our output. So let's look at the workspace. Here our build folder is created, and in it we have our test.txt. So everything is fine. It looks like we wanted it to. In my opinion, central feature of Jenkins is the ability to archive artifacts beyond the duration of a single build, and of course beyond cleaning the workspace. So let's add this directive to our build pipeline. I use a separate step for this one. Now we will add the archive artifact stage. Let's quickly run it again. As you can see, the archive is created and our artifacts are put into it. Let's see how it looks like on our dashboard. The artifacts are marked with this little arrow which points downwards. With a click on it, we can see which artifacts are archived now. In our case, test.txt. As a logical step, it seems feasible to be able to deploy our artifacts to the target system, which for example can be a QA system on another server or virtual machine. So let's talk about this. To be able to deploy another machine, we make use of a SSH agent and rsync. Since we need to use some username and/or password, we will store this in our Jenkins server's credential store. I highly recommend to use private public key authentication when it comes to SSH and related tools. So let's create a specifically for our Jenkins user generated ED 25519 private public key pair. The easiest, though not most secure way, is to add the private key file to the target machine's authorized keys for the user root. For convenience, we stick to that throughout the video series. You can either do that by invoking the SSH copy ID command, or by simply copy and pasting the contents of .sh/Jenkins_id_ed25519.pub to root.sh authorized keys on the target machine. In the latter case, don't forget to secure that file with chmod. So after we deployed our public key to our target machine, let's go back to our pipeline. As you can see, we have a Jenkins object which stores our private key of our target machine. Now back to our pipeline. So since we want to implement our deploy stage, we now look into it. So again, what did we do here? At the first step, we created a folder .ssh at our Liferay agent's user home if it didn't exist, and changed the permissions to it that only the owner can read, write and execute the contents. Next, we imported the SSH public key of our target host to our SSH known hosts file. At the last step, we copied our txt file in the target server's root home folder. As you can see, at the invocation of our SSH key, we gave the string array argument with the ID of our previously created private key object in our Jenkins. So let's save our pipeline again and build. So this is our console output. Let's look what happened. Since the pipeline finished successfully, we need to check if our txt file is where it belongs. So let's jump to our console. So we expect a txt file in our root's home folder. So let's open a root terminal and change to the root folder and list our contents, and voila, we have here a test.txt, and we can even look at the contents. It says text. So our file is where we expect it and has the contents which we want it to have. At this point, it probably makes sense to recapitulate what we've done until to this point. We first created our Jenkins file and used the example for our declarative pipeline at jenkins.io. You'll find the link to it in the description below. Then we added our always run stage to clean our workspace. For this we used the clean WS plugin. Since we want our build artifacts to be archived, we added the directive to archive files in the build folder with the txt extension. At our last step, we deployed our build artifacts to the target system by adding a ed25519 key to the root's authenticated keys and using rsync wrapped in an SSH agent to copy them. To be able to run our Liferay build scripts, we need to talk about scripted pipelines as well, since it adds the possibility to use variables and Groovy scripts to our pipeline. For example, if you want to add the build timestamp to some file names or report. The key feature of scripted pipelines is the possibility to integrate declarative steps as well as scripted steps. But again, one step at a time. So, let's start again at the by the Jenkins-ci.org provided example pipeline. So let's start again by the by Jenkins-ci.org provided example pipeline. It's in fact the scripted pipeline equivalent of our example from before. Let's pick it apart to see what it does. The node step is a keyword for Jenkins to use scripted pipeline processing. You can define on which Jenkins node or agent you want to run your pipeline by giving the agent name as a parameter to this directive. We have again build stages like before and the echo command to print some text to our console output. Another difference which meets our eye is the fact that there is no steps directive. Instead, the steps are implicitly defined with every line you add to your stage. Let's quickly adapt our pipeline to move forward. As you can see, I added a bit more intelligence to our after build cleanup. We don't want the workspace to be cleaned if the build has failed, and we don't want a deferred wipeout to happen. Essentially, what the deferred wipeout does is to wipe out the workspace asynchronously to our task by renaming the workspace directory to a temporary one and then delete in a background task. This can be used to run multiple builds of the same job in parallel. Jenkins will use for each build different workspace directories. This, on the other hand, can completely destroy nodes which are running the delete operations. This of course only makes sense if you have a big repositories where deleting takes very long, for example in cloud environments. So for us in this case it has no benefits. Finally, we want to include our gitignore file. There are two types of pattern, include and exclude. The pattern itself uses AND pattern syntax. If you want to learn more about the WS Cleaner plugin, you can do so by reading their documentation. I put a link in the description below. As we learned at our declarative pipeline, we have a directive always for steps we want to run no matter what. At a scripted pipeline, there is no such directive, so we have to work around this fact. There is also no after build steps, so we have to do so by wrapping our pipelines in a try-catch finally block. After wrapping our steps in a try-catch finally block, we can save our pipeline and look what it does. So, of course, nothing new will happen. And so we move on to our next step. As next step, we want to look into the possibility to store the shell output into a Groovy variable. So let's look again at our pipeline script. We at first use and modify our build snippet from before and then check if a certain condition is met. Let's again look what we've done here. At first, we created a build folder and then printed the word done into our file status.txt. Afterwards, we checked if the file really contains our keyword. If not, we throw an error. The ability to store standard out into a Groovy variable, of course, comes from the parameter return standard out, which we gave to our shell. Of course, we can have a multi-line script by wrapping it in triple quotes or triple double quotes. But be careful, the shell script is considered a failure when no output is returned. For example, when you grab for a keyword and standard out is empty afterwards. This can come in handy, but like with everything, it comes with a downside. For example, if an empty standard out is the desired state. I recommend not to use grep in this case and instead use the string contains function of Groovy. When we think about deploying build artifacts to another machine, there automatically pops up the question about checking if the deployment was successful. So, let's take again a look at our pipeline script. Let's again recapitulate what we've done here. We used our deployment steps from earlier to deploy our file. Then we checked if the file exists and at the target machine and has the keyword done in it. In case that our SSH command doesn't return our keyword in any form, the deployment is marked as unsuccessful. Now that we have seen how a Jenkins file in detail works, we can move on to look at the Jenkins files which are the subject of this video. So, let's start with the task every one of us runs into sooner or later, the upgrade process. For this, we have to think about things which have to be done to perform an upgrade. First, we have to download and extract the newest Liferay release from Github to a temporary location. Then, we need to stop the Liferay instance on the target machine. After that, we have to backup the old system and database. Then, we move the extracted release to the old location. After that, we have to migrate our properties file to the new location. As sixth step, we have to migrate the Osgi config files. Seventh, we migrate our own Osgi modules. 8. We have to migrate data and files. 9. We have then to upgrade the database. 10. We have to upgrade the Liferay service descriptor if Tomcat version has changed. At last, we have to start the new release and hope everything went well. So, with this keeping in mind, let's look at a Jenkins file which performs those tasks. Step 1. Download and extract the newest Liferay release. I have a script which I downloaded from github.com and modified to suit my purposes. You'll find the link to my GitHub project and the original file in the description below. But basically what it does is check for the latest release on github.com/liferay/liferay portal and download the tar.gz file, which is placed in the release artifacts. I too have script tools to help me with the migration. These are copied in the locally extracted Liferay folder. What they do is follow the steps from the Liferay update documentation written into scripts. They are also part of the GitHub project which is linked below. Basically, they take care of properties, portlets, data files and Osgi settings migration to the new installation. After all properties are migrated, inclusive the database upgrade settings, the database upgrade script from Liferay is executed. Then, when the database upgrade process is finished, the old Liferay folder alongside the DB dump are prepared to be transferred back to the Jenkins host. After transmission is complete, the Liferay backup on the Liferay host is deleted and the transferred artifacts are archived. Be careful with that. Under circumstances you'll need much disk space for that, so I recommend to only retain the last build with its artifacts. I also recommend to avoid putting credentials in a Jenkins file. For the database dump I use a credentials file on the root's home folder. My old installation is named with a timestamp, so I'm able to revert changes if anything fails. After the upgrade process, we now take a look at how we can deploy Liferay portlets from any given Liferay workspace. There is one thing we haven't discussed yet but comes very handy. Take your Jenkins file from SCM. How can we achieve this? We can store our GitHub credentials as a token on Jenkins. Then we can configure our project to use those credentials to retrieve our Jenkins file from SCM. So let's take now a look at another Jenkins file. Here, as you can see, I have defined two functions to check if the deployment was successful by calling blade CLI on the target machine. The rest is pretty straightforward. We build our project. In case we set a process variable production build equals true, we copy the artifacts to the QA system and the productive system. Then we check if the deployment was successful and archive the artifacts. We today looked into how Jenkins files work and how to use them to automate your Liferay environment. Of course, you can add more functionality like informing a group chat channel or sending emails. This will be subject of a future video. With that said, we reach the end of this one. Feel free to discuss the topics in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more videos like this. So, stay healthy and curious, and until next time, bye bye.